It all began with what should have been a simple visit, a casual evening between family, but it grew into something neither of us expected nor could control. I, Hira, at 64 years of age, had long since put away the notion of romance, convinced it belonged to my past. But when my 22-year-old nephew, Hark, walked into my home that summer night, he shattered every expectation I had about myself and love. The evening was warm, the air sticky with the kind of heat that makes the heart feel heavy. I had spent the day preparing a modest dinner: pasta, garlic bread, and a bottle of red wine, because even in my solitude, small gestures gave me comfort. I knew Hark would arrive soon, and I felt an odd excitement. It was a flicker of anticipation, so unfamiliar that I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was nothing more than the pleasure of seeing someone I cared about. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to Hark's radiant grin. His energy was magnetic, as if the entire room lit up just because he was in it. He stepped inside, carrying the kind of carefree enthusiasm that only youth holds. "Aunt Hira, you look amazing," he said, and though I laughed it off, his words stirred something deep inside me. We spent dinner reminiscing about family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays, sharing stories that made us both laugh until our sides ached. The conversation flowed naturally, but there was something different in the air, and undercurrent, a tension I hadn't noticed before. As we ate, I caught him watching me, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. I felt my pulse quicken. Was I imagining things, or was there truly something unspoken between us? After dinner, we moved to the couch, the evening wrapping around us like a cocoon. Outside, the sun had set, and a faint breeze drifted through the open windows, stirring the curtains. We sat close, so close that I could feel the heat radiating from him, but still separated by an invisible barrier neither of us dared breach. Yet, he leaned back, and in the dim light I could see the outline of his strong features, the way his jawline caught the glow from the streetlights outside. "You know," he said softly, "I've always looked up to you, not just as an aunt, but in a way I can't quite explain." His voice was low, each word deliberate, sending a tremor through me. "Hark," I began, but he silenced me with a look and intense, searching gaze that made my breath hitch. In that moment, the years between us seemed to evaporate, leaving only the weight of what we were both feeling, but could not yet name. "I mean it," he whispered, leaning closer. "You have this strength, this grace. I admire you more than I've ever admired anyone." There was no denying the sincerity in his voice, and it both terrified and exhilarated me. Time seemed to slow. The space between us shrank as if pulled by an unseen force. I could feel the brush of his arm against mine, subtle but electric. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a warning and an invitation all at once. I had lived by certain principles my whole life, but in that moment they felt like brittle paper in the face of a fire I hadn't expected. His hand grazed mine lightly at first, then with more intention. The sensation was overwhelming, like the first drop of rain on parched earth. "This isn't right," I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded us both of the line we dared not cross, but I didn't. He smiled, that familiar, disarming smile, only now it carried a new meaning, a promise of something forbidden. "Sometimes," he said softly, "what feels right isn't always what others understand." His words were a balm and a curse, stirring a longing I thought I had buried long ago. Without thinking, the scent of cedar and spice from his cologne enveloped me, grounding me and setting me adrift at the same time. "We can't," I murmured, though even as the words left my mouth I knew I didn't mean them. It was a battle between desire and duty, between what the world would say and what my heart whispered in the quiet spaces of the night. Hark's fingers traced the outline of my hand, sending shivers down my spine. "Maybe we don't have to decide tonight," he suggested, his voice filled with hope and uncertainty. It was both a question and an answer, an offer to step into the unknown without the weight of consequence, at least, not yet. For a long moment, we sat there, suspended in a fragile silence. The world outside continued its hum, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing within us. I knew that crossing the line between us would change everything, that it was a step we could never undo. But in that moment, the pull of desire was stronger than the fear of what lay ahead. When his lips brushed against my temple, I closed my eyes, savoring the tenderness in the gesture. It wasn't just about passion, it was about connection, something raw and real, something that defied explanation. I knew then that no matter what happened next, This moment would stay with me forever, etched into the deepest corners of my heart. Hark pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of 1,000 emotions swirling within me. "I'm thinking," I said, "that some moments are worth the risk." His smile widened, and in that smile I saw not just the young man I had known, but someone who saw me not as an aunt or an elder, but as a woman deserving of love, of desire, of something more than the comfortable monotony I had accepted for so long. Till the night stretched on, the air heavy with unspoken promises. Whatever came next, we knew we would face it together, whether it led to heartbreak or something far more profound. For now, all that mattered was the here and now, the quiet revelation that love, in all its messy, complicated forms, could find us when we least expected it. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was worth everything. The pale moonlight spilled through the window, casting a silver glow across the room, as if we had stepped into a world outside of time. The ticking of the clock echoed softly, a reminder that every passing second carried the weight of a choice we could never undo. Sat quietly on the old, worn-out sofa, the distance between us just a few inches, yet it felt as if an entire universe stood between us. Our eyes met again, and in that moment everything else faded into nothingness. It was just him and me, bound by an invisible current that crackled in the air between us. My heart pounded against my ribcage like a bird desperate to escape its cage, yearning to break free but shackled by invisible chains, family ties, and the unyielding constraints of morality. "Hark, we shouldn't," I whispered, my voice as fragile as a breeze stirring autumn leaves. He smiled a smile both defiant and sincere and gently placed his hand over mine. The touch wasn't just skin meeting skin, it was like a spark igniting something dormant deep within me, something I had buried for years. "Why not?" he murmured, his gaze unwavering, piercing through me as if he could see the turmoil in my soul. "We don't choose who enters our lives, and we can't control what we feel, even if we're family." His words chipped away at the walls I had built around my heart. His eyes mirrored the same longing I dared not acknowledge within myself. When his fingers lingered on my hand, it felt as though every boundary I had so carefully drawn began to blur and dissolve. The evening unfolded slowly, each moment pulling us closer together like the steps of a dangerous dance. He leaned in, his fingers brushing against my shoulders, and the warmth radiating from him sent a shiver down my spine, melting every resistance I clung to. "Hera," he whispered in my ear, his voice a soft caress but weighted with a fierce intensity. "I've always felt something between us, something I can't explain. It's like we were meant to be more than just aunt and nephew." His words hung in the air, as heavy as a confession, a truth neither of us had dared to voice until now. My cheeks burned with the weight of the line we were on the verge of crossing. "Hark, it isn't right." I tried to protest, but my voice trembled, betraying the conflict within me. The logical part of me knew this was wrong, but the fire in his eyes reignited a yearning I had tried to bury. His hand remained on my shoulder, not forceful but firm, as if grounding me in the storm of emotions swirling between us. There was something raw in his expression, a mixture of desire, hope, and sorrow, as if he knew we stood at the edge of something irreversible. "If this feels wrong, I'll stop," he whispered, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I just need you to understand, I can't control how I feel. I need you to know that." His honesty struck a chord deep within me, leaving me more confused than ever. I stood at a crossroads. On one side lay the familiar comfort of the life I had built, guided by family expectations and societal norms. On the other side loomed the exhilarating yet terrifying possibility of embracing something forbidden, a connection I had never anticipated. I felt myself being pulled into a whirlwind of emotions, not knowing whether to take a step forward or pull away. Hark didn't pressure me, but his presence, his nearness made me want to abandon everything and surrender to what my heart had been silently yearning for. Then, like a shadow creeping into the light, doubt began to cloud my mind. The voices of morality and societal judgment echoed in my thoughts, warning me of the consequences we were about to face. I felt his hand slowly slip from my shoulder, leaving behind a cold emptiness that stung more than I had expected. "I don't want to pressure you," he said softly, his voice tinged with sadness. "I just needed you to know I'll always be here, waiting no matter what happens." The room felt heavier with unspoken emotions, the air thick with tension and unfulfilled longing. I looked into his eyes, those same eyes that held both hope and resignation, and I knew in that moment that something between us had changed irreversibly. No matter what I chose, the connection we shared would never be the same again. We had crossed a boundary that couldn't be undone. And regardless of the path I decided to take, my heart would forever carry the memory of this night, the night when we faced our deepest truths and the love that shouldn't have existed. I stood there, trembling, my heart torn between fear and desire. I didn't know whether to move forward or turn away, but I knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, this night would remain etched in my soul, a night of forbidden passion, tangled emotions, and impossible choices. Night had fallen, and the world outside lay silent, as if it were holding its breath for what might come next. The room we sat in felt too small, the space between us charged with an energy that neither of us dared acknowledge aloud. It wasn't just the silence that weighed heavy on us, but the gravity of what was left unsaid. The hum of night creatures outside only amplified the tension within, every tick of the clock dragging us deeper into the unknown. I could feel Hark's gaze on me, steady, patient, as if waiting for me to break the unbearable silence. His presence was magnetic, a force I couldn't resist much longer. I fought the urge to turn toward him, to close the distance between us, and let him know that I felt it too, this forbidden pull between us. But the fear of what lay ahead, the weight of our family ties, and the invisible walls society had built between us kept me frozen in place. Hera, Hark's voice, low and smooth, pierced the stillness like a knife through silk. My heart clenched at the sound of his voice, so familiar, yet now charged with a depth I had never noticed before. I turned toward him slowly, and the intensity in his eyes almost made me flinch. His gaze held a mixture of longing and uncertainty, as if he too was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to jump or turn away. "I care about you," I whispered, my voice trembling under the weight of the truth. "More than I should. More than I know how to handle. But I'm scared, Hark. I don't know what this will mean for us." The words spilled from me, raw and unfiltered. My confession hung in the air, vulnerable and exposed, like a delicate glass that could shatter with the wrong response. I felt his hand brush against mine, deliberate, lingering, as if he was trying to reassure me without words. His touch sent sparks through my skin, stirring emotions I had buried deep within myself for years. "I understand," he said softly, his fingers curling around mine, holding them firmly now like an anchor in the storm, raging inside me. "But what if we stop running from this? What if we stop pretending it isn't real? What if we let ourselves feel just this once and see where it takes us?" His words were gentle but insistent, filled with a quiet hope that made my heart ache. And the sincerity in his voice unraveled me. Every argument I had clung to, every excuse I had told myself, suddenly felt weak and insubstantial. Just my defenses were crumbling, brick by brick, under the weight of what we both knew was inevitable. The air around us thickened with anticipation. Every breath we took a silent acknowledgement of the choice we were about to make. For the first time, I looked at Hark not as the boy I had watched grow up, but as the man he had become. There was strength in him now, a steady warmth that drew me in, no matter how hard I tried to resist. I shifted closer, my heart hammering wildly in my chest, as if warning me of the danger I was stepping into. But the more I tried to fight it, the more I realized that this wasn't just some fleeting attraction, it was a connection that had been waiting in the shadows, biding its time until now. And now, under the cover of night, with no one to see us, no one to judge, I felt free to surrender to it. "Hark," my voice was barely a whisper as I leaned in, my breath mingling with his in the space between us. He didn't move at first, as if waiting for me to make the final decision. His restraint only made my heart ache more. I knew he would never push me, never force me to do something I wasn't ready for. But his presence, his quiet, unwavering presence, was a temptation I couldn't resist. When our lips finally met, it was hesitant at first, a soft, tentative kiss that sent shivers down my spine. As the moment deepened, the kiss transformed, becoming something fierce and urgent, as if all the years of denial and restraint had erupted in a single moment. His hands cupped my face, his touch reverent yet possessive, as if he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. I melted into him, every fear, every doubt dissolving in the heat of the kiss. His hands moved down my arms, sending waves of warmth through me. His touch was both gentle and commanding, igniting a fire within me that I thought had long been extinguished. "Hera," he whispered against my lips, his breath hot and uneven. I don't want to live in fear anymore. I don't care what anyone thinks. All I care about is what we feel right here, right now." His words were like a lifeline pulling me from the depths of my hesitation. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of us in this moment, tangled in emotions too powerful to contain. I knew we were crossing a line we could never uncross. But in Hark's arms, under the shelter of the night, nothing else mattered. "Then let's not waste any more time," I whispered, my voice steady now, filled with a newfound certainty. His eyes darkened with desire, and in that moment I saw the man he had become, confident, loving, and entirely mine. There was no going back from this. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. Hark's arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. His touch was a promise, a vow unspoken. We might be venturing into dangerous, forbidden territory, but for the first time in my life, I felt alive, truly, undeniably alive. As the hours stretched into eternity, we stayed wrapped in each other, savoring the stolen moments we knew could never be undone. Each kiss, each touch, was a step further down a path we couldn't turn back from. But instead of fear, I felt hope, a wild, reckless hope that maybe, just maybe, love could grow even in the most unexpected places. We knew the world would never understand. We knew the risks we were taking. But under the cover of darkness, with only the stars as witnesses, we dared to dream of a future built, not on rules and expectations, but on the undeniable connection we had found in each other's arms. And no matter what came next, whether the world accepted us or not, we knew one thing for certain: we belonged to each other. And that, more than anything else, was worth fighting for. The night pressed down upon us, heavy with unresolved tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. In the dim glow of the moon filtering through the curtains, Hark's gaze lingered on me, burning with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, fast and uneven, as I lay beside him, acutely aware of the inches that still separated us. Yet those few inches felt like a chasm, one we were both poised to cross, teetering on the edge of something we had resisted for far too long. I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine, the soft rhythm of his breathing fanning across my skin. Every inhale, every exhale drew me closer to a dangerous decision I knew we would never be able to take back. The boundaries that had once seemed so clear now felt blurred, fragile, ready to crumble under the weight of our emotions. I knew the risks, the consequences, knew that what we were about to do was forbidden, a sin in the eyes of the world. But here, in the sanctuary of the night, there was only us, and in this moment, that was all that mattered. "Hera," Hark whispered my name, his voice thick with longing, his fingers grazing my hand as if testing the waters, waiting for permission. The slightest touch from him sent ripples through me, awakening a need I hadn't known existed. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the warmth of his presence, no longer able to fight what my heart had been yearning for. The soft hum of night creatures outside only heightened the silence between us, a silence buzzing with anticipation, with everything we had left unsaid for too long. "Hark," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "maybe this is more than just a fleeting moment. Maybe it's something we've been waiting for all along." His hand closed over mine, firmer now, steady, as if anchoring me in the swirling sea of emotions. "Then let's stop waiting," he murmured, his breath brushing against my ear, igniting sparks beneath my skin. "Let's stop pretending we don't want this." The urgency in his voice shattered the last of my defenses, and with a shaky breath, I turned toward him. The moment our eyes met, I knew there was no going back. The thin veneer of propriety we had clung to for so long was gone, replaced by a fierce desire that had been simmering just beneath the surface. His lips found mine in a kiss that started soft, tentative, but quickly deepened into something more, a desperate, hungry expression of everything we had kept bottled up. His hands cupped my face, his touch reverent yet demanding, as if he had waited a lifetime to hold me like this. I melted into him, the fire within me spreading with every kiss, every touch. His hands moved down my back, drawing me closer until there was no space left between us. His touch was no longer just comforting, it was electrifying, filling the empty spaces within me, awakening a desire that had long been dormant. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, guiding it slowly along my body, encouraging him to explore the places I had kept hidden, untouched, for so long. His touch was light and teasing, every brush of his fingers against my skin sending waves of pleasure through me. My body arched into his touch, responding eagerly, as if it had been waiting for this moment for far too long. Hark's lips trailed down my neck, each kiss deliberate, stoking the fire that burned hotter with every passing second. I could feel the tension between us building, thick and palpable, as if the air itself had become a live wire, charged with unspoken promises. His hands moved with more confidence now, tracing the curves of my body as if he were memorizing every inch of me. I gasped softly, unable to stop the sound from escaping, a sound of release, of surrender. For the first time, I let go of the guilt, the hesitation, and yielded fully to the desire that had been building between us. His gaze met mine, dark with passion, filled with the same hunger that mirrored my own. In that moment, we both knew there was no turning back. There were no words left to say, only the silent understanding that we had crossed a line we could never uncross. Hark's hands slipped beneath my blouse, his fingers brushing the bare skin of my waist, igniting sparks that rippled through me. My breath hitched, my body trembling beneath his touch. The warmth of his hands on my skin was intoxicating, every caress a promise of what was to come. But I gave him a breathless nod, silently urging him to continue, to take me where I had never dared to go before. His hands moved slowly, almost reverently, lifting the fabric inch by inch, revealing more of me to his touch. He explored me with a tenderness that unraveled the last of my inhibitions, leaving me exposed and vulnerable before him. Each touch, each kiss, felt like a revelation, peeling back the layers I had built around myself, freeing me from the constraints that had held me captive for so long. My breathing quickened, my pulse racing as his hands roamed freely over my body, teasing and caressing, bringing me to the brink of pleasure with every stroke. His lips followed the trail of his hands, kissing down my neck, across my collarbone, and lower still, until I thought I might burst from the sheer intensity of it all. The sensations overwhelmed me, a heady mix of pleasure and longing, of release and anticipation. "Hera," he whispered against my skin, his voice husky with desire, "you are everything I've ever wanted." His words sent a shiver down my spine, filling me with a sense of belonging I had never felt before. In his arms, I was no longer bound by fear or guilt. Here with him, I was free to be myself, free to feel everything without restraint. As the night stretched on, we became lost in each other, our bodies moving in perfect harmony, each touch, each kiss, a step further down a path we could never turn back from. The world outside faded into oblivion, leaving only the two of us, entwined in a dance of desire and discovery. Whatever came next, whether the world accepted us or condemned us, we knew one thing for certain: we belonged to each other, and that was worth everything. The walls around us seemed to vanish, dissolving into shadows as the intensity of the moment consumed us whole. The outside world was forgotten, swept away by the tidal wave of emotions neither of us could control. Time lost its meaning, there was only here and now, the feel of his skin on mine, and the raw energy that pulsed between us. It was as if the years of restraint, Hark's hands roamed over my skin with a reverence that made my heart ache. His touch was deliberate, like he was memorizing every inch of me, committing each sensation to memory. When his lips found mine again, they moved with a slow, deliberate sensuality, as though the kiss carried an unspoken promise, a vow that whatever this was between us, it was more than just passion. It was need, longing, and a connection neither of us could fully comprehend. He gently pressed me down onto my back, his gaze never leaving mine, as if he was searching for any hint of hesitation. But there was none. In that moment, I belonged to him completely, my heart laid bare before him. His hands glided across my skin, setting my senses ablaze, and the weight of his body against mine made my pulse race with an intoxicating mix of fear and desire. Each kiss was deeper, slower, yet more desperate than the last, as though we were trying to pour every suppressed emotion into every touch. His hands traveled to my hips, gripping them with just enough force to send a shiver through me, pulling me closer as if afraid that the night might steal me away. My breath hitched, my fingers threading through his hair, tugging gently, as a soft groan escaped his lips, vibrating against my skin. And we moved together, our bodies instinctively finding a rhythm as natural as the ocean tide. Every shift, every brush of his skin against mine felt like poetry, an intimate dance that told a story too powerful for words. His touch was both tender and possessive, as though he wanted to protect me, hold me, and claim me all at once. "Hera," he whispered against my neck, his breath hot, sending goosebumps across my skin. "I've wanted you for so long." The vulnerability in his voice made my chest tighten with an ache I hadn't felt in years. His words were a confession, spoken in the dim glow of night where judgment couldn't touch us. In his arms I felt more than desire, I felt cherished, seen and understood in a way that made me tremble. I dragged my nails down his back, feeling the muscles beneath tense and relax with every touch, marveling at the way we fit together, like two halves of a whole, finally reunited after being kept apart for far too long. There was a sacredness in the way we moved, an unspoken understanding between us that this was more than just a moment of indulgence. It was a culmination of everything we had suppressed, everything we had denied, and everything we had always been too afraid to admit. As our bodies entwined, the tension between us grew, coiling tighter and tighter, like a spring ready to snap. Hark's hands never left me, tracing patterns of fire along my skin, making me feel weightless yet grounded all at once. His lips danced across my collarbone, down my shoulder, and every kiss left a burning trail in its wake. My mind spun with the overwhelming sensation of him, his scent, his touch, the warmth of his breath against my skin. His hands found my hips again, pulling me closer, deeper into the moment, as if the space between us was unbearable. "Hera," he murmured, his voice thick with longing, "I need you. I need this." His words ignited something primal within me, an ache so deep it consumed me. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my body trembling beneath the weight of emotions too powerful to contain. With every kiss, every touch, Hark unraveled me further, until there was nothing left but raw, unfiltered desire. Our hands explored each other, desperate and eager, as if we were discovering something sacred for the first time. His lips rarely left my skin, brushing against my neck, my jaw, my lips, every kiss like a silent declaration of love, a promise that echoed in the quiet night. The pressure inside me built with every movement, every caress, tightening like a knot that was about to burst. I felt Hark's breath quicken against my skin, his body trembling slightly as the intensity of our connection deepened. His gaze locked with mine, and in his eyes I saw not just desire but something deeper, a tenderness that made my heart ache. It was as if in that moment he saw not just my body but the very essence of who I was, and that realization was so overwhelming that tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. "Hera," he whispered again, his voice a hushed prayer, "I never thought I could feel this way. Not like this." I pressed my forehead to his, our breaths mingling in the space between us, and for a moment, everything else faded into insignificance. It didn't matter what the world outside would think. It didn't matter that we were crossing boundaries that could never be uncrossed. In his arms I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt alive. As the pressure within me grew unbearable, Hark's hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer, tighter, until there was no space left between us. He whispered my name again, his voice trembling with the same longing that burned within me. The way he said my name, soft, reverent, sent a shiver down my spine, making my entire body tremble with anticipation. The moment stretched on, every second a dizzying blend of pleasure and emotion. And just as I felt myself teetering on the edge of release, my body quivering beneath the intensity of his touch, I realized that whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges or judgments we might face, none of it mattered. Because in this moment, under the cover of darkness, we were free. Free to feel, free to love, free to be exactly who we were without apology, without shame. And in his arms, I knew I had found something I had been searching for all my life. With one final breath, we gave ourselves over to the moment, letting the night carry us wherever it wished. And as we lay tangled in each other's arms, hearts pounding in unison, I knew that whatever happened next, whether the world accepted us or not, we would face it together. Because some connections are too powerful to be denied, too beautiful to be forgotten. And in the quiet of the night, with only the stars as our witness, we had found ours. Then, in one breathtaking moment, we reached the height of our passion. Our bodies moved in perfect sync, driven by something primal and unspoken, as if we were two halves of the same soul finally reunited. For the world outside ceased to exist, time itself unraveled, and in that suspended, weightless instant, there was nothing but the purest form of connection, no barriers, no reels, only us. We gave ourselves over completely, surrendering to the rhythm of desire, allowing pleasure to sweep over us like waves crashing against the shore. The air was thick with the scent of intimacy, the remnants of our passion clinging to our skin. We lay tangled together, limbs intertwined, hearts still beating in unison, as if refusing to come down from the heights we had just reached. Our breaths, shallow and uneven, began to steady, the lingering traces of ecstasy fading into a tranquil stillness. I shifted slightly, my head resting on Hark's chest, listening to the soothing rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear. It was in this quiet aftermath that everything began to settle, and yet something in the air remained electric, a hum of something unresolved, as if the universe itself had shifted on its axis. I tilted my head to meet his gaze, and the look in his eyes stole what little breath I had left. The contentment I saw reflected there was unlike anything I had ever witnessed, a rare, unguarded peace that could only come from having discovered something extraordinary. It was as if, in that moment, every fear, every doubt had melted away, leaving only the raw truth of what we had become to each other. His hand traced slow, lazy circles on my back, the simple motion grounding me, even as my mind swirled with the enormity of what had just transpired. No words were spoken, none were needed. Words could never capture the depth of what we had shared, the way our souls had intertwined as effortlessly as our bodies. It was something far beyond language, beyond reason. A breeze slipped through the open window, causing the curtains to sway gently, the moonlight casting silver shadows across the room. In the soft glow, I saw Hark's expression shift, tender, unguarded, but also tinged with something bittersweet. I knew he was thinking the same thing I was, that whatever we had found here in the secrecy of the night could never be erased. We had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. "Hera," he whispered, his voice low and hoarse, as if the weight of what he was feeling had settled deep in his chest. His hand continued to trace my skin, every caress deliberate, as though trying to memorize the shape of me. I knew this would change everything, but I don't regret it. His words were like a balm to my soul, soothing the lingering traces of fear that threatened to creep in. In his arms, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for, something I had thought was forever out of reach: love. Not the kind that came with conditions or expectations, but a love that defied reason, transcending the limits of time, age, and circumstance. And in that love, I found a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I needed. A freedom from the rules and roles that had always confined us. Here in his embrace, I wasn't just someone's aunt. I was simply Hera, a woman who had found solace and belonging in the most unexpected place. I pressed a soft kiss to his collarbone, the warmth of his skin anchoring me in the moment. "I don't regret it either," I whispered, my voice steady now, though my heart raced beneath my ribs. "I've never felt this right, Hark. Not with anyone else, just you." A flicker of something raw and vulnerable flashed in his eyes, hope, maybe, or relief. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me as if he feared I might slip away. "Then stay," he murmured against my hair, his lips brushing my temple. "Stay with me, Hera. No more hiding, no more pretending." Words were simple, but they carried the weight of a promise to defy everything that had tried to keep us apart. Society's rules, family expectations, the whispers of what was acceptable, none of it mattered anymore. Not here, not now. For a moment, the enormity of the path before us threatened to overwhelm me. We were stepping into uncharted territory, knowing full well that the road ahead would not be easy. But as I lay in Hark's arms, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath mine, I knew there was no other choice I could make. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." He smiled, a slow, lazy grin that made my heart swell with affection. "Together," he echoed, as if the word itself was a vow. The night stretched on, the quiet hum of the world outside lulling us into a peaceful stillness. We stayed wrapped in each other, savoring the precious moments we had stolen from the world. Every kiss, every touch was a silent declaration of the bond we had forged, a bond no one else could understand. And as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, I knew that this was only the beginning. Our story was just unfolding, and it would be a story unlike any other, a tale of love, found in the most unexpected place, of two souls daring to defy the rules that had tried to keep them apart. It would not be easy. There would be challenges ahead, questions we could not yet answer, battles we had not yet fought. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready to face them, because I knew with a certainty that ran deeper than anything I had ever known, that whatever the future held, we would face it together. And that, more than anything else, was worth the risk. Hark's fingers laced through mine, his grip firm and steady. As I looked into his eyes one last time before the morning light claimed us, I saw everything I needed to see: love, hope, and the quiet promise of forever. No matter what the world might say, No matter what challenges lay ahead, we had found something rare, something beautiful. And in that moment, I knew that nothing, not fear, not judgment, not even time could ever take it away from us. Because we were no longer just two people bound by family ties. We were something more. We were a story waiting to be written, a love waiting to be lived. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next.